This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law. Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guests and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. As more lesbian and gay couples move out of the shadows into mainstream America, the incidence of same-sex parents adopting children become more commonplace. Today we'll look at this issue with our guest, Morton Newberg, an attorney who represents lesbian and gay couples in the adoption process and a gay parent himself. We also have Lee Crespi, a psychotherapist who counsels lesbian couples seeking adoption, who also can speak from her own personal experience. Hello, Morty. Hello, Lee.
Hi.
Hi.
Now, you're both gay and lesbian parents, adopted. First, Morty, you're an attorney. I know you have a general practice, but I know you do adoption as well.
That's
Tell
right.
me, how does adoption from gay and lesbian couples differ from heterosexual couples?
Well, first of all, in New York, you can only adopt if you're a married person, or you have to either be a married couple or an unmarried person. So for lesbian and gay couples, there's an issue in the fact that only one person in the couple can actually be the adoptive parent initially. So they basically have to decide which of them will be the adoptive parent initially. Now in New York, as a result of a Court of Appeals decision by the highest court, it has been determined that you can then have a process of second parent adoption by which the second member of the couple can then adopt the child as
But
well.
that's at a later time.
Right.
That's not at the initial adoption phase.
That's not in the initial adoption
But of course,
phase.
all the agencies that one would go through are aware that the couple is either gay or lesbian, I'm assuming that. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, they do a home study, it's up to
I
them
would assume
to...
so. So it's just a way to get around...
Well,
the
we're not
existing
really
law.
getting around anything in that we're not speaking in terms of just in terms of the way the law is structured in New York. Now, in other states, in New Jersey, I'm aware that couples have adopted and finalized their adoption as a couple. Because of the way the statutes are drafted in New York, the actual legal adoption process, you only have one adoptive parent initially, and then you have the second parent adoption process.
Now, Lee, you're a lesbian
Mother.
and how long have you been an adoptive lesbian parent?
Well, I think this sort of speaks to the question in that my son is going to be 4 years old in August, and my partner and I adopted him at birth. But
You
I
both
didn't-
adopted?
No, she adopted him first.
Okay.
And then I wasn't able to until this
Decision came
decision
down?
came
Right.
down. I was then able to adopt him as a second parent, and that was finalized only last year.
I could imagine there would be problems if you let's assume you had not adopted as a second parent, and as relationships go, and I'm not saying this personally, but sometimes relationships, heterosexual or homosexual, don't work out the way you planned them. Of course, what standing would you have if you were not an adoptive parent of the child?
None.
Or what about visitation?
According to the Court of Appeals, a non-parent, which would be the other member of a couple. There was a case a couple of years ago in which it was determined that the non-parent does not have any visitation rights or any other rights. That also cuts both ways. The parent not only doesn't have any rights, there's also no duty to support.
Right.
So not only can you have an issue where the non-adoptive parent would have no rights vis-a-vis the child, they also, in a sense, have no legal responsibilities.
What about the situation where the non-adoptive parent, the second parent who
Right.
didn't go through the second process,
Right.
was really the breadwinner, and the other person stayed home with the child,
Right.
and the relationship terminated?
Well, I think
That's a big problem.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem in the way the law is structured. Unfortunately, from my point of view, I mean, the court was exercised foresight in the second parent adoption is based sort of on a standard of the best interest of the child, which is always a standard in these kinds of domestic relations and family issues. I think personally that the decision vis-a-vis non-parental rights in this kind of structure was a decision that I think is wrong-headed and that causes a lot of problems for lesbian and gay couples potentially. That's why it's crucial for lesbian and gay couples to proceed with a second parent adoption.
Lee, when you became a mother,
Yes.
tell me, did you face different problems and different issues than a heterosexual couple?
Oh, sure.
Can you discuss that with us?
Well, sure. There are a lot of things that, first of all, on a personal level, your child has two mothers or two fathers. And so that means that you need to think about, well, what you're going to tell the child, how they're going to understand why their family is different from other families, how you're going to respond when people ask you about your child's father. For instance, my son is blonde. This is one of the adoption issues, too. And so many people would come up to me and say, oh, you know, is his father blonde? And strangers, because people feel free to talk about your personal life when you have a child, because people like to talk about children.
It's a topic of conversation.
Yes,
it's an easy way to
right.
topic.
And so then you have the whole question of, well, do I explain my entire situation to this total stranger and the fact that the child is adopted, that you're in a same-sex couple? And so that happens over and over. And when the child is an infant, it's not so much of an issue because they don't understand what's happening, but as your child gets older, you want to be able to model I want to be able to model for him that that my feelings about our family are good feelings. So how I respond to people is very important because it's going to affect his feelings about our
And of
family.
course, as soon as he gets older, many questions are going to be asked to
Right.
him.
And he's already...
Where is your father?
Right.
And
Do you have a father, or where's your father? And so he's in nursery school with other children.
Who have fathers.
Most of whom do, yeah.
right.
So
I'm
it becomes
sure-
important to choose where you live.
I'm sure
what
it's not an
community you live
easy
in.
thing for a child to face when other, peer pressure is very difficult.
Yeah.
And children cannot be, sometimes they're not the nicest of individuals.
Right.
And not the
Right.
most tactful, they're just children and they can
Yeah.
be hurtful when they,
At this age,
times.
I find they're more curious, and they're trying to understand. And there are some kids who want to know why they don't have two moms, because it sounds kind of neat to have two
Right.
moms. But I think it's really important for my son to be in a community where he knows that there's diversity, where he sees single parents, he sees families with traditional mothers and fathers, he sees interracial families, he sees adoptive families, and so he knows that families are different, that all families are different. Not all families look the same, and also that there is a certain amount of, at this age, of kind of wanting everything that other people have.
Morty, can you tell us a little about yourself and your child?
Well, I've been with my partner for about 8 years. My
Right.
son's 2.5. He's also...
Did you both adopt?
We did, well, our adoption was actually not finalized in New York because there are various options within the adoption process, which is why when you mentioned about agency, there are actually different kinds of adoptions in New York. You can adopt either through an agency or you can do a private placement
course.
adoption, which is where you're dealing directly with the birth mother. So my child is also biracial, so there are those issues as well in the adoption process, which anyone can face.
Your child's African American, or?
In this particular case, yes.
Okay.
African American and white, and so I think increasingly in the world, and certainly in New York, there's a whole range of differences between people. I think that's not exclusive to the lesbian and gay community. So, just sort of talking about what Lee was talking, I think that every child these days has different things that are different. I think that's true throughout.
Share with us some of your feelings. Now, the child's 2.5 years of age, running around,
Very
Right.
cute.
terrible twos, and of course, he may also has he been asking questions?
Not
not
he's
yet.
not quite at that stage where he's asking
But
questions.
are you prepared to answer the questions when they do come? And of
Yes.
course, they will come.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were everything was disclosed as part of the adoption process. In our particular instance, because it was a private placement adoption, it was also an open adoption, so we have a certain amount of contact depending...
With the birth mother?
Yeah, depending on the structure. Different people have, different ranges of that. There's no right way of doing it. It really depends on the parties. And as an attorney, I mean, you have to deal with different wishes that people have. You have to counsel them on different options, the different ways to adopt. You can also adopt internationally. So each person has to find the way that works best for them.
Now, Lee, you're a psychotherapist. You
Yes.
counsel lesbian mothers in this very issue. Now, as the child matures, are there problems with the child rebelling against the situation? Or how do you stop this rebellion against it? Children are naturally
Well,
rebellious.
children rebel, and so I'm not sure what you're asking, because
Well,
children
the
rebel
problems-
against whatever the family
you name it.
situation is.
Especially as they get older and hit the adolescent years.
I think I feel as a therapist in general that it's really important for children to have the opportunity to express all of their feelings about their parents as they're growing up, to say what they're unhappy about and not to feel censored in that regard. I mean, I think that anger about adoption, I think children do go through a lot of mourning often and feelings just about the adoption issue, which is separate from a same-sex issue. But I would expect that my son will have feelings about being in a different family, and I would encourage him to have
What about the
that.
lesbian couples that you counsel now? What are the main problems that other lesbian couples out there who are considering adoption may very well have to deal with? And they may want to know them now.
Problems that they may have to deal. Well, I think that one issue often is about roles, which is the advantage and disadvantage in a way in same-sex couples. I think that because there aren't the traditional expectations that gender roles sort of bring, which is to say that even in these days where people consider themselves fairly progressive, women do still tend to bear the responsibility for the children, even if they're working. And in a couple that's same-sex, then there isn't that automatic built-in expectation as to what the relationship with the child is going to be. And so I think that people need to be clear about their competitiveness or about their jealousy, that each woman or each man brings something different to the child and is going to have a different relationship with the child, and to value that and to understand what that's going to be like, and that the child may be closer to one parent or the other at different times.
Okay. At what stage do you actually sit down with the child and say, one, you're adopted, and two, let me tell you about us?
Well, I believe that adoption should be a word that the child is familiar with from the time he has any awareness of language. So that even if he doesn't know what the word means, he knows that that's part of who he is.
Okay.
Just like he knows he's Jewish or he's Catholic or he's Protestant, but he doesn't know what that means.
And then the second?
And then the second was about being gay. Well, he sees that. That's
No, he
in his home.
sees two mothers, but of course, can the child relate that they're lovers?
Well,
I mean, do you
I hope
discuss
he
this
sees
with,
us
do you discuss
kiss,
that
he sees
with the
us hug,
child?
he knows we sleep in the same bed, he knows we're a family, so
But of course, it's
until he's
different than
old enough,
perhaps than his neighbors and the parents of the children at school.
and he knows that that's different.
And
Yeah.
do you, what age do you discuss this with him
To
or her?
discuss that we have sex?
No, with the child, meaning that you're a lesbian couple.
I mean, I think
and-
children are going to come home and say, why do I have two dads or two moms?
Right.
This child has one dad, this child has one mom,
So
this
when the
child
child
has a
starts
mom and a
school, is
dad.
that
And
what
then
it
to
is?
explain.
I mean, especially, in New York, kids tend to go to school early. I mean, they can go to preschool at the age of 3, so they're interacting with a lot of other kids. I mean, there are a lot of kids in my neighborhood, in
Yeah.
your neighborhood, who there are a range of kids. I mean, I think the kids are naturally aware of that. If you have an open relationship in terms of with your children as well, they're going to sort of ask these questions. They sort of, I don't think you want to, I haven't gotten to that point. I don't think you want to sit down and you want to try to impart the information, hopefully without making it something
Marty, do you
monumental.
feel-
It just sort of comes up naturally.
Do you
So-
feel there are additional problems that you have and perhaps will have because you're two gay men raising the child?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there are...
Share that with us.
Well, as I said, you know, in my particular case, we're of different religions to begin with. So there are all sorts of differences floating around this right away. I think what we don't have is, you know, and I don't think that people do that anymore. I think with adoption for a long time, there was this sort of view that you get a child who sort of looked like you and you would act like it didn't happen. I don't think that people espouse that today. So I think that, frankly, in our kind of relationships, I mean, certainly our children are going to be asking, it's sort of obvious that there's something a little bit different, and I think they're going to be asking those questions. Why do I have two dads? I mean, that's a natural question. You know,
Plus all the other things that any couple has.
Right.
What religion are we going to raise the
Right.
child?
Why don't we have
Right.
Christmas? My son wants to know why we don't have Christmas.
in
So
our
he's
case,
more
we
concerned
celebrate,
about that.
you know, in our case, we celebrate a bunch of different holidays. So
So you have all the
Right.
problems that a heterosexual couple may have, and then some.
Yes.
We're going to continue with this discussion right after this break. Stay tuned. You're watching Lawline. Keep with us. Hello, I'm Alan Schnorman. Most of you know me as the host of Lawline, where I interview the most knowledgeable attorneys in the field of law today. So I understand the importance of choosing the right attorney to represent you. With so many law firms to choose from in personal injury law, how do you know who to call? At my firm, Zalman & Schnorman, we fight for the rights of accident victims. If you have been hurt in an accident of any kind, including construction accidents, you may be entitled to a substantial money award for your pain and suffering. Don't try to evaluate your case yourself. Call us at 1-800-LAWLINE for a free consultation. If you are too injured to come to our office, we will come to you. We get paid only when your case is settled or won. If you have any questions about your accident, call us at 1-800-LAWLINE. Remember, the insurance companies have lawyers representing them, and so should you. Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. We're talking about same-sex marriages. Very interesting. We could all learn by this. Morty, right before the break, you had something to say regarding the additional
you were talking in
problems
terms of additional problems.
that a gay couple has in raising a child. What are they?
I mean, well, what I wanted to say about that is, I guess you could say that there are additional problems. I guess I think on the one hand, you have to be aware of the situation, be aware that potentially your child, and I counsel this to clients, you know, as well as a lawyer, because as a lawyer, you're dealing with legal issues, but when you're dealing with family issues, which is a part of my practice, there is also a human element, and you have to deal with those issues as well, be it in divorce or custody issues or adoption issues. So I think it would be naive and ridiculous to say that there aren't particular problems, and I think I think that your child is going to have particular reactions because of the situation. On the other hand, I think on the other side of the scale is that everyone has differences and issues. You know, there is no perfect family, so they're just different issues.
Now, of course, Lee is a professional, and she gives professional advice to lesbian, and I know some gay couples as well, in this area. Do you recommend that gay and lesbian couples receive professional advice on how to handle properly for the raising of the child?
Well, first of all, generally, if you're adopting in a private placement adoption, you have a home study. And the home study is generally with a certified social worker. And generally, if that person is doing their job, part of what they're doing is in the home study. And in New York now, you must be certified as a qualified adoptive parent, and that stems from the whole Lisa Steinberg problem.
You have to be certified.
Fingerprinted.
Right.
Before you can get custody of a child, it's a two-step process. You have to be certified as a qualified adoptive parent.
And I assume that would mean that you're not a drug addict and
Well, it's
you're
all
not an
sorts of things.
alcoholic.
You have to
and-
submit, there are medical issues, there could be medical issues, you have to submit a medical history, financial issues, that you have to be in a situation where you could properly
Even
take
for
care of
private
this child.
adoptions, even if you go out to
Yes.
Seattle, Washington,
Right.
you
Yes.
found a mother there
Right.
who wants
Right.
to
Adoption
have
is a
you
legal
adopt the child.
process.
Yeah.
It's private in that you're dealing directly with the birth mother, But it's not private in
let me
that
ask you
it's a
this.
court process, it's a legal process. It has a force of law behind
I
it.
don't know if it was in your case, but if you advertise, which is a very common area in
Right.
adoption, advertise for mothers who want
Right.
to give up their child, for usually when they're young
Right.
young women.
Right. Well-
When a gay couple comes to them, then what reaction do they have?
Well, first of all, I should say you can't advertise in every state. So one of the things you have to determine when you're adopting that your attorney can help you with is there some states where you can advertise.
Let's assume we're in a state that you could advertise.
Fine.
What reaction does the mother who's going to give up the child have? You come to her and it's a gay couple. Or it's a lesbian couple.
I think that these are the various issues that people have. It depends. Obviously, the adoptions that are successful, it's something that's recognized, but it's not an issue. People who have an issue with it are not going to continue to deal with you. I mean, the adoption
Is that
process...
what you found, that there are a
Well, I think
segment of the
that's-
population that says no, I'd rather
No, I
not?
don't think it's a particular area of the country or a particular type of person. I think it can be very surprising in that way, the different
Yes.
views all over.
Right.
But that's part of the adoption process for anyone. You have to find a birth mother who likes your situation.
Lee, let's talk about donor insemination, which we used to call artificial insemination.
Right, okay.
You got to get with the terms today.
That's right.
Donor insemination, what is it? And tell me about the responsibility.
Donor insemination is a very old process that's been around, I don't know how many years, but many, many years, I don't know exactly, but by which a woman is inseminated with the sperm of a man, let's say, not through having sex, but by a doctor. The sperm is inserted into her body
With
by
some
a
sort of
doctor.
instrument?
With some sort of instrument.
Right.
And it's been done sometimes even with a woman might have her own husband's sperm because they're having some difficulty conceiving. But
course.
what we're talking about usually is where the sperm is donated by another man,
Now, of
or
course,
by, in the case of lesbians who want to get pregnant.
now anybody can go to a
Any
sperm
man.
bank
A sperm bank, a
And
friend can do it,
and have
a relative can do
and
it.
have be donor
Be inseminated, be
Absolutely.
inseminated, right.
Now, let's discuss the rights of the parties. Let's assume your partner, your lesbian partner, is donor inseminated,
Right.
gives birth,
Yeah.
and if she's the mother.
Yes,
Okay.
you have no
Basically the
legal
same
rights,
legal
the same
issues.
thing, unless you adopt the child. You have no legal
right,
standing
although you
at
may
all.
be the
Doesn't matter.
breadwinner.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
And you may be the person who actually raises the child. You may
Yes,
have a
and-
long-term relationship for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And yet, if the
Well, if you
relationship
don't do a
terms...
second parent
you
adoption,
don't
that's
do
why
second
second
parent
parent
adoption.
adoption is so important in New York. In New Jersey, you can, well, in New Jersey, you would have to do some form of second parent adoption in that case anyway, because you're actually
Right.
dealing with a biological parent. Now, the other issue that a lot of clients will have when they come in is, do they use a known donor or an unknown donor? That's a very personal choice. The advantages of an unknown donor are that you don't have to deal with termination of parental rights. Part of what adoption does is terminate parental rights. That's why the courts had to rule.
Let's go into that.
Well, let me explain something
Terminates
about that.
parental rights. Let's assume I'm the adoptive parent, you're the second parent.
Right, well, that's what I was just going to explain.
My rights are not terminated by
Right,
you.
but that's why the courts had to rule on that. That was one of the issues in second parent adoption, was the point of the process was not to terminate the rights of the first
Right.
parent, but to add another parent. And so that's part of what the courts ruled on in second parent adoption. What it's similar to is a step-parent adoption, where you have a married couple where you have one of the individuals is the parent and the other one.
And I think what
is seeking to
Morty
be-
is saying is that when there is a known donor in an insemination, that donor has to then relinquish his rights to the child.
Right.
Whereas through a
if I
bank,
may
that's
just,
not necessary.
on the legal issues of that, it's important at that point, when you're contemplating that, to speak to your attorney before the woman is inseminated. I often sometimes have had clients come and the woman is already pregnant, and then there can be difficult issues, because technically when you use a known donor, actually legally when you use a known donor, there is a father who has rights.
Who may or may not
May
have
decide
rights.
to exercise his rights.
And this can
Right.
become a very difficult issue, because there may be a misunderstanding.
That's an issue that pulls out the hearts.
Well,
Pulls out your
I
heart, because...
I think what it has to do with is that everyone has to be clear on how they're doing it. You can have a situation where all three are going to parent, but the idea is to get this
Has to
ironed
be in
out.
writing.
It should be in writing, though there's some issue as to how enforceable. You're talking
In other
about a
words,
contract.
even if it's in
But
writing,
standard is always the best.
even if it's in
the
writing, you say, you know, I've changed my mind.
No, not in terms of that, but the standard is always the best interests of the child. We're dealing with a gray issue of the law here.
So a writing may not even be, in other words, if we have a contract, and I'm saying I'm donating my sperm, and then I change my mind and say, you know, I really want to be the father. Even that is still the best interest of the
Well, you could
child.
conceivably go to court, and then there could be an issue as to the best interest of the child. The idea, hopefully, is that the parties come to a lawyer, sit down, draft up an agreement.
Lee, I
in the
have a
course-
question for
in
you.
the
And
course-
I
in
think
the course
that's a
of drafting
situation where
up the
people do
agreement.
need
Right.
counseling.
Right.
Lee,
People should be
right.
clear about what they're getting into.
The lesbian parents that you counsel, do you find less problems and less issues when one of the parties was donor inseminated as opposed to adopting through the
no.
adoption? No.
No.
Tell us why.
Because do you mean emotional problems or legal problems?
Emotional.
Well,
Legal, I have
because
my
think
left there. You're the emotional.
I mean, one of the reasons my partner and I adopted is that we felt that when one parent is biologically related to the child and the other is not, that it sometimes creates problems. In
Share that with
terms
me.
of a feeling of being left out, a feeling of not knowing what the partner's role is in relation to the child. If the biological mother breastfeeds, that creates a very strong bond in which the child is really bonded to that mother, and the other mother doesn't feel like a parent. She's not the father. She doesn't have the father's role. She didn't provide the sperm that created the child. So then it can create tension in the family and in the couple.
Meaning
It
that
can lead.
But I think that's a personal decision,
Yeah, and
because
that's
for
another
many
reason why I think people
donor-
need
birth
to-
mother may feel more closer.
I'm not saying that happens
may.
always. Could have a
It's almost
closer
like
bond.
a closer bond.
And that's a reason I think that people need to talk about what they're getting into, talk with each other, understand what they're, be prepared that this is, as all parents should be prepared for what they're getting into in terms of having a child, how it's going to change their relationship, and how they want to deal with things as they come up. Be involved with support groups or be around other lesbian families. And many lesbians, I think, are choosing to have, for both women to have a child.
If there's a lesbian
For
couple
that.
out there, what's your recommendation regarding adoption as opposed to donor insemination? What's the
I say
recommendation?
do
decision.
it. It's a personal decision.
Right.
If you want to have
Don't
a
be
baby, have a
afraid,
baby.
just do
Don't
it.
be afraid. Yeah.
Don't be afraid, but
Being a
which,
parent is great. That's my advice.
which method
I
to
don't-
utilize?
You
I
would-
couldn't advise.
that's
It's
a very
really
personal-
a personal
Morty.
decision.
If there's a gay couple out there and they're saying, well,
Lesbian and-
no,
Interesting.
gay meaning homosexual. I've learned that from you, the two of you.
Men.
Men. They're sitting in their living room now and want to say, let's adopt a child.
There is also
We have,
surrogacy.
that's another show.
Not in New York.
Let's adopt a child. What's your advice to them?
As far as let's adopt a child.
Yeah, they're
Consider-
saying, we have a stable relationship. I feel there should be more. Let's adopt a child. What do you say to them?
If you want to do it, do it. It's something you have to want to do. I think it's like parenting. I think for lesbian and gay couples, on the one hand, we have this wonderful opportunity. But a lot of the
Quickly?
issues are the same. They're the issues of parenting. You have to want to do it. It's a lot of work.
And
If
you
want to
heard it
do
here.
And do it well.
Marty Newberg, thank you very much for appearing on Lawline. Lee Crespi, thank you for appearing on Lawline. It's a very interesting show. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman. Thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program was made possible by the law firm of Zalman and Schnorman, whose practice is limited to personal injury and insurance law.